Hey, LA Progressive friends and family. This is Dick Price and Sharon Kyle coming to you from the LA Progressive. This is our office. And we kind of run on a real short budget, so a small budget. So we're asking you to, if you can't contribute, to at least share, to join, to subscribe, and to give us a thumbs up. Thanks so much.
Hi, LA Progressive readers. Thanks for joining us again. Today, we're here with William J. Astor, Bill Astor, who had a full career as an Air Force officer, serving part of that time at the Cheyenne Mountain Nuclear Control Center. Has been a professor, is a prolific writer, publishes bracing views and publishing his thoughts and articles almost every day there. How are you doing, Bill?
Good, Dick. Thanks so much for having me.
So recently, with Matthew Ho, you wrote an article decrying the plan to invest $1.7 trillion in refurbishing our nuclear stockpile. What's wrong with that plan?
Right. Yeah, I'm glad you used that word invest because the military loves us to think of it as an investment. Where we're going to get some kind of return on our investment, which is most likely to be nuclear war and devastation, rather than any greater sense of national security. Now, as you know, Dick, uh, we both remember the nuclear freeze movement from the early 1980s when there was a sense of hope in our country that we could get over this Cold War that we had with the Soviet Union, where we were staring each other down, and there's a chance of nuclear war. Then, Ronald Reagan actually worked with Mikhail Gorbachev. They had real negotiations. We had true strategic arms reduction rather than just limitations. And all of that now has been forgotten. It's all pretty much out the window as the Pentagon tries to sell us on the idea that we need this massive new expansion, really, of nuclear weapons, allegedly because Russia has them. Of course, Russia has always had them, but China is building some new nuclear missiles, but still China has only a fraction of what the United States has. But nevertheless, we're supposed to be very, very afraid. So in my sense, what I want to see is a return to what we were trying to do under Reagan and before Reagan, and that is real reductions in nuclear weapons rather than, building a whole new generation of them.
Yeah, so at a time when in many ways our country's in trouble, infrastructure is falling apart, bridges are falling apart, our educational system is really struggling, and $1.7 billion could do something good with that, never mind Medicare for all. So why does the argument win that we need to spend all this money building nuclear weapons that we've already got covered, as you indicate, with the weapons that exist on the submarines, the Trident submarines?
Yeah,
So why does it, who wins the argument?
yeah. No, it's 1.7 trillion. It's an almost unimaginable sum when you think about it. And why does the argument win? Well, part of it is just the sheer strength of the military industrial complex. There's always people who profit from these massive, as I said, they love that word investment. They love modernization. But actually, two legs of the nuclear triad, the triad being land-based ICBMs, bombers, that the Air Force does the ICBMs and the bombers, and then the Navy has their nuclear submarines with Trident missiles. Well, two out of those three legs are really obsolete. And you don't need to modernize something that's obsolete. You need to get rid of it. So my former branch, I'm a retired Air Force lieutenant colonel. Part of it is just, the Air Force will never give up anything unless, I mean, it's the same with the Navy, it's the same with the Army. all these military branches are competing for their slice of the military budget, which is now about $900 billion a year. So, the Air Force always wants a new bomber. They always want a new nuclear bomber, whether they need it or not, they want it. ICBMs, well, you probably remember back in the 1970s under Jimmy Carter, may he rest in peace, that the idea was these land-based ICBMs in fixed silos were obsolete. So we had to build the MX Peacekeeper system, which moved the missiles around in like a shell game. They were going to do it on rail or by truck or whatever. And fortunately, that idea was so expensive that even the Pentagon said that we're not going to do it. So, but the whole point of that is the reason why we wanted to shuffle these missiles around is because they were obsolete. They were easy for the enemy to destroy. But here we are now, basically 45 years later, saying, well, we're going to take out these old Minuteman III missiles, which are built, sometime back in the 70s, and which still work, and we're going to replace them with a new Sentinel ICBM. And of course, there's a military contractor that is making billions and billions off of that, and the Air Force is keeping these bases open in places like Wyoming and North Dakota, and the senators and representatives who have those bases in their districts, well, they support this because that means jobs. That means jobs for Wyoming, F.E. Warren, Grand Forks, North Dakota. These are jobs, and so this is how it's sold. It's sold as the Air Force says, of course, we need it. There's a threat out there. Senators and congressmen like it because it's a job creator. Military contractors like it because they're just making money, hand over fist on these ultra expensive weapon systems, and it's sold in the sense of well, we're falling behind China. China's expanding. Russia's threat. Don't back down before Putin. So this is how it's sold. So it's sad because we already have over 5,000 nuclear warheads. The Russians have roughly 6,000, and that's enough. That's enough to destroy the Earth and several other planets. And we really don't need more.
So the counter is what I started at the first. I mean, we have much greater needs for that money, or we could reduce the taxes. But I mean, we really need to invest in our education system. We need to invest in healthcare system. We need to invest in infrastructure, and there's a lot of jobs there too. So why can't that argument beat the military-industrial complex?
Yeah, no, it's hard. It's hard because the national security state, or I like to call it the national insecurity state, because they're always trying to make us, we the American people, feel insecure, and so there's a lot of reasons that go into. I mean, it's great. I mean, I guess as we know, President Biden had some success selling an infrastructure bill, so we did get some improvements to infrastructure over the last 4 years. And that's really where, as you say, Dick, that's where we should be placing our money. We should be placing our money on construction rather than destruction. I mean, you go back to your era in the Vietnam War. I mean, just think of the enormous sums of money the United States wasted in the Vietnam War and all the destruction. I mean, recently, we spent something like $2 trillion on the Afghan war, on the war in Afghanistan. And as the quip now goes, we, after 20 years of effort and $2 trillion, we replaced the Taliban with the Taliban, right? So, I mean, and that's not me. Who said that? I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but I mean, that's basically what happened. In Iraq, we spent another 2 or 3 trillion searching for weapons of mass destruction that weren't there. So, unfortunately, when you look at, and as you know, I'm hardly the first person to say this. It goes back to General Smedley Butler in the 1930s, and of course President Eisenhower in 1961, who said, we, the United States, we've created this huge military-industrial congressional complex. It has an enormous amount of power. It employs millions of people. You have a couple million of service members in the military. You have all of the military contractors and camp followers and all the rest, private contractors. So there's just all of these vested interests, if you will, all of these big time contractors who spend millions of dollars, lobbying Congress and convincing various candidates, whether it be Trump or Biden or Kamala Harris, that you better be on our side, you better be strong for the military, or it will basically dismiss you as weak-kneed and a commie and all the rest. And so it's very difficult to go against this. I wish more Americans would realize how strong America already is, how safe comparatively we are with our two huge oceans, the Atlantic and the Pacific, a long and peaceful border with Canada. We know we have problems with the border with Mexico, but nevertheless, I mean, they're not really military problems. They're problems with immigration and drugs and so forth. I mean, we really don't need to be spending these colossal sums, and certainly not the 1.7 trillion that's planned on more nuclear missiles.
So Donald Trump is about to get sworn in a couple of weeks, and he makes a lot of provocative statements. It sometimes seems that that's the point of them, just to stir people up. But do you have any additional concerns with him and our nuclear stockpile?
Yeah, I think my biggest concern with Donald Trump is I give him credit in the sense that at least during the debate, and I think I can't remember if it was the Biden debate or the Harris debate, but at least Trump mentioned the danger of nuclear war. So I give him credit for that. My main concern with Trump is his ignorance. I don't think Trump knows what the nuclear triad is. I remember when he was president, he boasted about how his nuclear button was bigger than Kim Jong-un's in North Korea. He's prone, Trump is, to inflammatory rhetoric. So, I think, interestingly, I think Trump is a curious person. I mean, I think he realizes that nuclear war would be bad for business, right? You're not going to make much money as a businessman if everything's been nuked and most people are dead. So, I think he actually has and does not want to see this kind of nuclear proliferation. On the other hand, I don't think he has the patience, the persistence, the strength of will to resist, that siren call of the military-industrial complex that, we must spend more. We need more weapons. We need to be stronger. We need to be number one. I see Trump as kind of taking the easy way out and just letting the complex pretty much dictate terms to him. I could be wrong, but we'll just have to wait and see.
So in years past, there has been a fairly loud nuclear disarmament movement, but it seems awfully quiet right now. I mean, people like you are ringing the bell on a regular basis, the alarm bell, but who's championing this movement now?
Yeah. Well, I know we lost a key person. I think it was last year when Daniel Ellsberg died, and yeah, I mean, there are still people out there. I know there's a conference coming up. I'm part of the Massachusetts MAPA, it's Massachusetts Peace, whatever it is. They're having a conference at the end of this month, and they're tackling the issue of 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 nuclear weapons and proliferation and all the rest. I think that's one of the issues. I mean, there's still organizations, there are still people expressing concern, but the kind of mass movement that we need, like with the nuclear freeze movement in the early 1980s, where people were going into the streets, and you had millions of people. That's what we need again. But unfortunately, I mean, part of it is, again, I think Americans generally don't know a lot about the triad or nuclear missiles. We're not even really encouraged to think about it anymore. Back when I was a teenager and in my early 20s, I mean, this is where you had the Day After movie that was, I think, came out in 1984, which was all on, was one of the top rated movies in, I think, television history, where we had a nuclear war. So it kind of showed people just gave them a little bit of sense of the kind of, what doomsday would look like. Of course, it would have been far worse than anything, even I think even Hollywood can imagine. So there's just not the kind of movement. I think, I don't want to, part of it is you just don't see it in the mainstream media anymore. I mean, it's just, and I guess that's probably because the mainstream media is largely captured by corporations. I think something like, was it like seven big corporations own just about all of our mainstream media outlets. And generally those corporations often linked to or own places like Boeing and Northrop Grumman and Raytheon and all the rest, GE. So I think that's part of it as well. We've kind of forgotten as a people, or we've been encouraged to forget as a people, that we still are on a razor's edge. I mean, that the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists still has the atomic clock at 90 seconds to midnight. And that's about as close to midnight as it's been. And of course, this is partly because of the Russia-Ukraine war and the fact that the United States keeps sending more and more, more and more weapons to Ukraine to launch against Russia, which is not exactly a recipe for peace.
Yeah, I mean, so occasionally a mainstream media commentator will say, well, we're risking nuclear war in the genocide in the Middle East, or we're risking nuclear war by poking the bear in the Ukraine. But that's kind of as far as it goes. I mean, there's no real, and so I think you and I and people of our generation have lived our whole lives with this threat over our heads, to the point where you feel you can safely ignore it. So
Yeah.
are you in Massachusetts, are you trying to beat on the local representatives to get them to raise the issues in Congress?
Yeah, I mean, I've written to my senators. Elizabeth Warren occasionally says a few words that make sense. I know that she's hired people that are somewhat critical or skeptical of the military industrial complex, but I mean, great. I mean, maybe Elizabeth Warren is one of the senators that has a little bit of independent thinking on the subject. But then again, when it comes to the genocide in Gaza, Elizabeth Warren is basically another rubber stamp for Israel. So I know that's changing the subject, but that's been incredibly disappointing to me that so few of our senators and representatives in this country are willing to speak out against unspeakable violence being perpetrated by Israel using American-made weaponry. I mean, we've provided them something like, well, it's over $20 billion now in military aid, basically so they can bomb and kill women and children, and force the Palestinians off their land. So it's incredibly frustrating. And if any, I think one of the things I write about, and I know this will resonate with you, is I mean, we used to hear about peace, right? We used to hear there was a peace movement, obviously very strong during the Vietnam War, but nowadays you don't hear about peace being talked about at all. I like to joke the only time you hear about peace is right around Christmas time, where you start hearing peace on earth, goodwill toward men in the Charlie Brown Christmas special. And you go to church and, we Catholics say, peace be with you, that kind of thing. But otherwise, all we see in the media, all we see is talk of war and more wars. And now with this, so-called terrorist attack in New Orleans, I think once again the message is going to be that, well, we need to double our budget now. We need to hire more police. We need to, more SWAT teams, more weapons, more intelligence gathering, more this, more that. And so this is what frightens me. We can't seem to find our way out of constant warfare and violence in this country.
Yeah, about the genocide in Gaza, videos that you see and photographs you see it seems like it's mostly accomplished, and that it will take, I've read that it'll take decades to rebuild Gaza into a livable place if people choose to do that, and if they choose to do it for the Palestinians. And then there's the counter movement now that they're passing laws in various states. If people protest against Israel, that they can be expelled from school, they can be charged with crimes. I mean, it's remarkable. It's remarkable what's happened to activism, movement, freedom in our country.
Oh, right. No, absolutely. I mean, it's disgusting, really, because some of my colleagues in the Eisenhower Media Network, like Matt Ho, who's he was a Marine captain. He fought in combat overseas. And then he went into the State Department, and he resigned in protest in 2009 because he knew that Obama's surge was not going to work in Afghanistan. And of course, he was proven right about 11 or 12 years later. The war kept going on. He did his best to try to stop it, and of course, they didn't listen to him. But when he went and some military members went to try to protest against Bibi Netanyahu's most recent visit last year to Congress, and they were telling me just how insulted they felt when Netanyahu and other people are basically accusing them of being puppets for Iran. So here you have Netanyahu, Israel's leader, coming to address Congress, and he's denouncing people like Matt Ho and other U.S. veterans who are protesting his genocide, and he's calling them basically agents for a foreign power. He's calling them agents for Iran. Any sane American should be outraged by that.
Yeah, and yet, well, there's corners of the world, certainly bracing views is one corner where that outrage exists, but it's not winning the day. I kind of despair for our country in the way that we can ignore the things we're doing, shipping all the bombs to Israel, utterly destroying. I mean, every morning I pop up the news, and 18 more people killed someplace in Gaza, and there's no real reckoning of it.
Yeah. No, that's true. No, that's true. It's not something, again, if you're just tuning into CBS News or MSNBC or Fox or whatever, you're not going to see that. You'd have to go over to Al Jazeera, for example, to see coverage that's hardcore, and even, I mean, hardcore in the sense that it actually shows Palestinian suffering. It's like we're not supposed to see that, because you know just because it might make us think, it might make us realize that we're fueling this awful killing. This is not something that should be done, and yet it just seems like our ability to act against it, to protest, to act against it, is being curtailed, and in so many different ways, as you were saying with the student protests. The students are basically expelled or otherwise. They find, I've heard, as there's students who were protesting, then they try to go and get jobs, right? And they get oh, you were protesting against genocide in Gaza. We don't want to hire you anymore. It should be the opposite. It should be, you actually showed some moxie. You actually got up and you have integrity. You're a person of character. You're protesting genocide. We want to hire you. But it's the opposite. And it is very disturbing.
So a friend of ours is a senior law professor at USC Law, and he posted a notice for a pro-Palestinian event, and he was called into account. His job was threatened. Now he's popular enough that he could blow it off, but it's a strange world. It's a strange world.
Yeah. I mean, if I mean, not to, I don't, I'm too young to remember McCarthyism, but it's something like that, right? It's a kind of pressure being brought on all of us. So if you dare, for example, to say that I don't support what Israel is doing, this is genocide, this is murder, it's mass murder. It's like all of a sudden you obviously hate the Jews, you're obviously anti-Semitic, and it's like, well, no, actually, I taught a course on the Holocaust. I went to the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. I took a special seminar for that as a military officer, and to teach the Holocaust to cadets at the United States Air Force Academy. So the whole idea of the Holocaust is as they say, never again. We never want this kind of event to happen in history. It's not never again just for the Jews. It's never again for anyone. No people should be, singled out and persecuted in this way. So anyhow.
Well, except perhaps the Palestinians. Maybe there's an exception there. Anyway, Bill, I really admire the sharp points of view that you publish almost every day with Bracing Views Substack. You have this fairly unique point of view, being a full career military officer and history teacher. So anyway, thank you so much for sitting still for this, and we'll do it again sometime.
Yep. I mean, anytime, Dick. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
Okay. Thank you much.
Thank you.
Thank you for sticking around. If you like the LA Progressive content and the discussions we have here, please consider clicking the subscribe button below, and also give us a thumbs up. That helps to grow our audience by feeding the algorithm, which helps to get this content in front of more eyes. Thanks for stopping by. We really appreciate your support.